Good day. Today we are going to continue on with our project and give it a bit of color. The first thing that we're going to do is make it so that cards are selectable and give a bit of a better graphical look to the game. So as you can see here, when the game starts, it's going to deal out the flop and the player hands. And display a select war card display, which you may have seen when I first booted this up. After that, we can look through the cards if we want to. That didn't work the way I wanted it to. Just give me a second. So we should be able to click on any card to get a better look at it, and if we want to play it, we just click on top of it again and it will play into the war card pile. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is go to our main node and we're going to add a new scene to it, which is going to be a tile map. Once we have the tile map, we're going to go up here, add a new tile set. Click on the new tile set button, and down here we're going to go into our graphics folder and drag out the monochrome pack. One thing I'd like to mention about this pack before we start modifying it, if you're playing with the original Kenny pack and doing this the hardcore way, I took this square right here, although any of the adjacent squares would be fine, and made it black. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new auto tile, and we're going to select this area right here. It might look all messed up for you, so first thing you got to do is make sure that the step is set to 14, separation 2 here, and under the selected tile we're going to change the auto tile bitmask to 3x3 minimal, the subtile size to 14, and the subtile spacing to 2, and it should look like this. So for you, probably when you got in here, you should click region, just click any place on here, make sure these settings are all correct, and then reselect your area. Make sure that you get all 12 of these squares because you want this black square here for the auto tiling. I'll zoom in a bit here so you can get a better idea of what I'm doing. So after that, we're going to go over here to Bitmask after we have it all selected, and we're going to take everything except for the outer borders. And if you accidentally go outside the lines, you just have to right click and you'll get it. So it should look like this. There should be like a 2 area there going straight down to here, leaving a gap here, etc. all the way around. And then this black square that we carved out of the tile set, we're going to fill like that. This is an incomplete 3x3 minimal tile set, but it will be adequate for what we want to do. So after we are happy with that, we can click on tile map here and we'll see our pack right there, and we can see that everything's set pretty messed up. So these are going to be 14x14. I think that's right. Oops. Yeah, perfect. Oops. There we go. All right, so let's see here, around here, maybe here, just draw a straight line across. Just referring to the demo project to kind of get it. That's one thing I hate about Godot is when you go out of Godot and come back in, if you have this tool selected, you'll almost always draw a big line right across the screen. And then we're going to grab the fill bucket here, fill in the middle, and it'll look nice and pretty. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a new node. Bring it up here above the card controller. We're going to call this one enemy. And we're going to give it a child, which is going to be just an animated sprite. And for this animated sprite, new sprite frames, and go back into our character sprites. And I did a really lazy animation of the Mr. Wizard pose. Actually, we can take these two out for now. Oops, I did not mean to do that. All right. Animated sprite. Oops. Yeah. All right, so we'll change this default, what do we call it here, into idle. So we're going to call this idle. And we'll just bring frame 1 of Mr. Wizard in here. And then we'll add a second animation. Oops. We'll call this one talking. I'm not sure we'll actually use this, but we'll toss it in anyway. All right, so we're going to move this sprite where we want it to be and make it look however we want it to look. And change its Z index to -1 to put it behind the table. And that looks pretty good. I can already tell that our enemy hand, here we'll make it editable children. So our enemy hand, we're going to want to move all of this stuff down a bit, probably to around there. And that looks okay. Let's see what it looks like when we run it. Yeah, so obviously that looks kind of ugly. So let's first we'll try to grab that, which is, where is it? Under table. I guess we need more editable children. The deck is fine. Left point. So we're gonna move this there, and this curve I think needs to come down a little bit. So it looks like now. All right, and move this over slightly. And that should be pretty good. That's okay spacing. Maybe move it over right just a tiny bit more. Perfect. That should be perfect. Okay, so now that we have that, let's create a new child node, OTD. We're going to call this one War Cards. And we'll add two position 2Ds. Oops. So we'll add one and duplicate it. The first one we will call enemy card position. And the next one we'll call player card position. So we'll grab the enemy card position just by clicking it here, hold down Alt on our keyboard so we can drag it to where we roughly want it to go. That should be good for now. And same with the player one, which will be just below it. And this is where the war cards are going to be played out once we get them. And just to make it slightly more visible. We're going to add a sprite to each of these. And for the sprites, if we go into cards, we're going to use this card.png background, and we will add it to the texture of each of the sprites. And I think the scale for these has to be 5. Yeah, that should be right. Pardon me. So I'll grab these positions and make them as pretty as we can. Yeah, okay, so we're gonna go back into the tile map, and I guess we'll make another line. And it's, oh, sorry, I have the bucket selected, which is probably screwing me up. Actually, you know what, I'm gonna do it down here. Perfect. All right, so that looks relatively pretty. Let's see how it plays here. So the 6th card that comes out, because I think I draw flop twice, this won't be in play ever. We can even probably lower these cards a little bit for aesthetics, and maybe play around with this to raise that card up. Maybe even shrink the scale of these cards, but we'll worry about those details a little later. So as far as I'm concerned, ooh, I somehow screwed that up. That's fine. There, that's what we need. We want to make sure that it's perfectly centered on there, because the cards that we play are going to play directly on top of these. Yeah, okay, so that should be good for that. All right, so now we're going to go into our main script and start making a very basic state machine. So we're going to add a reference to the war cards area. Oh, actually, sorry, I want to put that somewhere else. So the war cards that we just created, we're going to slide this into the card controller. And perfect. Now for displaying the messages, we're going to create a UI node. So we're going to add a child. It's going to be type canvas layer. We're going to call this UI. And for now, I think we just need not a texture like. So label. Apologies. Yeah, we're going to add a label to that, and we're going to call this alert. And then we'll go into the UI. We're going to save the branch as a scene. And it's just going to be called UI.scene. And we'll click on the little movie clacker there, and we'll come in and we'll actually add an animation player too. All right, so for the alert itself, we want it, oops, roughly here, about that size, and make sure you type in small caps because the font that we're using for this only does small caps. All right, so under custom fonts, we're going to add a new dynamic font, and the font we're going to use is right under our graphics. It's called Kenny 1-bit. Drag that in, and we're going to change its color to red, which is perfect. For the animation player, we're going to create a new animation, and we'll call this one Display Alert. And Display Alert, we're going to look at the alert here. We're going to create a thing for its visibility. So we'll turn that to on and make a key. Just because by default we're going to have this invisible at the beginning, just so that you don't see the placeholder text, although we could just delete the placeholder text for the same effect. Another thing too is that we got to make sure, where is it? No, we're fine. Okay, so after we get that, we got to go to the modulate property, and we're going to reduce the alpha down to 0. Make a keyframe, and the last one is the scale. Under rect, go to scale 1 to 1, create, and then we're going to change the size of this to 1.5 seconds. And right here at 0.5 seconds, we're going to add another key to modulate, and we're going to change this value all the way up to full alpha. And then we'll add another one here, and finally one at the end, except for this one. We'll change the alpha all the way back to 0. Oop, I have the wrong one selected. This one specifically, change the value to 0. Perfect. And then here, we're going to add a key to the scale as well. Click on it to select, and I think 3 should be good. So if we go all the way to the beginning and hit play, that's what it's going to look like in game. Perfect. All right, so that's all we have to do for that part. And now we can go into our main script, and we're going to add the UI here to our variables. Perfect. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start setting up the enum for our very basic state machine that we're using for this. So there's going to be a setup phase, select flop card. I might change the structure slightly because select flop card, select turn card, and select river card all do the same thing, I think. But for now, we'll just give it its own phase. We can always change names of things later very easily. And there might be a cleanup phase at this too, but we'll just leave it like that for now. And we'll create a game state variable to keep track, and we'll start it out at setup. And I'm not sure if we're going to keep this functionality, but I currently have a variable called current round to keep track of what round we're on. And we're going to change this to card selected, which is going to default to false. And the variables player card and enemy card will correspond to the selected cards from both players for whichever round we're in. We'll keep this here, so this basically, well, I think I already went through that, but that's just a quick timer. Players are going to draw 3 cards, and then we don't need that. And we'll draw the flop right away, yield for a timer, and we won't need that second flop. All right, so this will allow us to send an alert. I guess I should add that functionality before I get too far ahead of ourselves. So let's go back to our UI scene, and we're going to create a script on here. Go by our awkward scene tree here and add this to scripts ui.gd. Create it, and we're good to go. It's actually incredibly easy script overall. So all we're going to do is create this function called send alert. It will basically change the text in the alert object, and then it will play the animation. Simple, easy peasy. Another thing too is we're going to default alert to off, and that should be ready for play. So I think right now it should do something if we hit play. And yeah, sorry. So basically, this part here hasn't been implemented yet because we haven't gotten to it, but the enemy card is basically going to be automatically selected here. The enemy hand object is going to pass the first card in its array, just as a ultra basic AI, so we have something to work with. And we don't need that check there. That was while I was working on it. Actually, we'll just keep that there since we're going to get to that. So now that we have that set up, we have to set up the card so that it can be selectable. So we're going to have to add a bunch of new variables here. We'll start with a selectable variable, and we'll create a setGet set selectable. And so selectable just determines if cards can be selected. So just add some functionality to make it, if the cards, if you're at a part of the round where you don't want players to be able to click on the cards, that's the variable you set on all the cards. The selected card basically identifies whether or not a card is actually selectable. This stops accidentally being able to select multiple cards instead of one at a time. And I think you'll see how it works. It's fairly basic once we get rolling here. And for cards, we're going to add a variable here called front sprite path, which I could probably or no, we definitely want to keep this. So the enemy cards are always going to show the backs of the cards because you're looking towards the other player and you just see the back of the cards. But when he plays the war cards, we need it to flipped so that we can see the value. So we're going to store that here. We're going to create another export value variable called focus move on Y, and this will determine how high the card moves up once you select it. We're going to start it out with a value 40. That's getting annoyed because I haven't done my set get yet, so we'll create that right now. To be honest with you, I don't completely remember why I put a set get on this, because in Godot you can definitely access member variables indirectly, even if it's considered a poor practice. In fact, if we go back to our initialization inside the hand, not here. When the deck is created, we could decide to actually create a function within card to set all of these. Instead of setting all of these directly, we could create a function that passes in the card scene, the card name, the card value into card as a function instead of accessing these members directly. And it's probably a better practice, but you could take the initiative and do that if you're really hardcore into object-oriented programming. I would probably do that on my first refactor personally. So yeah, so selectable equals val. Perfect. So yeah, this is just a really basic set get. So the value comes into here, it changes the value of selectable to whatever the value that was passed by whatever tried to adjust that. All right. So I changed some of the tween settings just because I like the way they look better. They still actually have room for improvement, but I'm just going to copy and paste them in. I basically just changed the timing values, I think, mostly. And now we have to add some functions for when the card's in focus. So first one we're going to add is a function called makeFocus. We'll just pass for now, and we're going to need a function for off focus. And a function for make active. If we go into the card scene itself, we're going to want to go here and look at the input event on the collision 2D, and we're going to connect that right there. Okay. So the first thing for the logic when people click on this is that we want to make sure that if somebody clicks the mouse on it, if the event is equal to the left click, which now that I think of it probably isn't in this yet, so let's go to the input mat and we're going to add a left click event, and to the left click we're going to add a mouse button, left button, and we're going to add that. So now this should in theory work. So if that's the action, and it's already selected, so if this is the selected card and we've clicked on it, we want to select it. So basically the interface is like a double click method. You click on the card to look at it, to make it stand out, and if it's the card you want, you click on it again and it will play it. If not, you can click on a separate card which will become the selected card. So if that happens, then it's going to declare itself as not the selected card anymore, which will make it so that it can't be clicked on again, and it's going to emit a signal called card selected. And it is going to pass itself as an argument. All right, so we're going to have to create two signals for all of this to work. So it's going to use two signals. The first one is going to call the active card. And the node that it's going to pass is itself. And the card selected. And we're actually going to make this so that whenever it's created on its ready function, it's going to connect itself. So it's going to connect its signal to the active card signal, which we'll get to in a second. So it's connecting to parents. So if we look to our main structure and we look at the player hand, all the cards are going to be produced underneath it. So it's actually going to be calling to this script, which I will get to in a half second. So back here briefly, I accidentally made two ready functions. That should be all we need to do for that. So getting into the hand script, which is the script that's used right here, we have to make a few changes. So that's all good. That's all good. So we're going to add a couple of more functions down here. The first one we're going to add, is the active card function. And what this is going to do is it's going to call a group cards. And it's going to tell them to use their make active function, and it will pass the card. So whatever card's passed into here, they're all going to check to make sure if they're the card, and then they're going to change to it. So back to card here. So again, in here, it's going to go to the make active function. So back to card, our make active function will say if the card doesn't equal me, because that's what we're passing, is an actual instance of the card that is currently asking to be made active, then it will call off focus. And what off focus will do is, if the card is selectable, it will move the card to hand position, hand rotation. So it'll basically go back to wherever it was set in the hand during setup. And we will change its Z index to equal 1. Oops. And this is no longer the selected card. So all the cards will be called for this, and actually before I get too far into this, I should definitely make sure that my card scene has a group called cards. Perfect. So obviously, if that's what happens when we go off focus, when we make it focus, if it's selectable, it's going to change its position shift. So it's going to create a variable called position shift, which is going to be a vector 2. It's going to be equal to our position, which is also a vector 2. It's going to take the y version of that, and we're going to subtract, which will move it up on the y-axis, the value of focus move on y, which is the exportable variable that we created. And if its position is equal to its hand position, it's going to, yeah, right. So if its position is in the correct position, it's going to move it, and it's going to change its Z index to 2, bringing it up to the front if it's behind any other cards. It's going to change its selected card to true, and it's going to emit a signal called active card to itself. Or sorry, it's going to emit the signal active card, and it's going to send itself as a variable. And that will be what goes over to the hand variable and tells all of the other cards that if they're not active, that they are to basically not do anything and make sure. So essentially this whole system is to make sure that every time you select a card, any other cards that might have been marked as selected instantly become marked as unselected and move back into their original positions. So moving back to our main script, we're going to flush this out so that our process function handles our game state. And if we're at the select flop cards thing, it's going to go, this functionality might change later on. The problem with developing as you're teaching something is that sometimes you change the design. In fact, this is the second time I've recorded this entire series of recordings for this particular video, because I kind of changed my design to make it more friendly if anybody is looking to make a mobile game, which is one of the reasons why the way to select cards involves 2 clicks as opposed to a drag and drop or anything, or hover and select, which were easy options to implement, but I decided against it just to make sure that it was super easy to turn this into a mobile game if desired. So now we have to change whether or not a selection is allowed. So let's go back into hand here and make sure that I have all the variables needed to make this function. Yeah, so down here, we're going to add a function called allow selection. And it's going to go through the entire hand. And we're going to change it to selectable, or not selectable as the case may be, depending on that value. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do, now that we have that, is we're going to go into the enemy hand script, and we are going to make it so that it stops crashing us because it can't pass any cards, and we're going to change the, we're going to override the normal sprite cards function, which we already did here, but we're going to basically take the functionality of the other sprite cards function. So first we're going to create a function called pass card, which is right now it's basically acting as a really crappy AI for the enemy hand, which allows him to pass a card into our game loop when we're looking for war cards. Like currently you can see that it creates a pass card variable and assigns, it makes it equal to the very first card in its hand, and then it removes the card from the array, the reference to the card, which is a very important thing to do because otherwise every time we do things in the hand script, it would affect this card too, so we would accidentally be moving it into our hand even though it's already played. And then it'll return the pass card, and that's pretty essential. If we look back here, we can see that this gets declared. So even before the select flop card has come, the enemy card has already been selected because it doesn't, it just makes it convenient. It's a little gameism. So the second part of this, I basically redid the sprite cards function. Up to here, it's identical to the hand, the regular hand function for spriting, as you see here. But instead of actually assigning it to the sprite, it assigns it to a new value called front sprite path. And this means that when this card gets played, the effect that I want is that it will fly from the enemy's hand directly to where it needs to go. Anyway, yeah, we don't have all the code in, so we got an unexpected error there. But yeah, so basically once we get to there, this is the last part that changes is that it has this front sprite path thing, and then as per normal, we change the sprite that's displayed when the enemy hands are drawn so that the card back is what the player sees. So to clear that area that we just saw, we're going to go into the war cards, and we might as well save this as its own scene. Open it up here, and we'll give it a script. All right, so right now, this script will consist of a variable that contains the player card and the enemy card. These two probably won't get used. I was kind of playing around with the implementation, so I can actually just delete these out of here for now since they don't actually do anything. And for player, the important thing is that these variables are here right now, and these positions are here. Basically, once the play war function gets called, it's going to move the player card and the enemy card from their current position to the positions where these cards are right here. All right, so let's see if it works. Nope, we got a problem. So let's see what the problem is. Right, so under the main function, I forgot to add a function for the card selected. So we'll do that now and I'll explain what it does. So this is done by a signal that's sent from the card itself, which sends that signal to the main. This was just a print statement that I was using for finding stuff. Obviously, I need to create a flop card selected variable. Oh yeah, I just changed the variable name, so it's card selected. And now everything should work swimmingly. Let's see. No. All right, let's investigate some more. All right, so I found the error in the deck.gd script. I forgot to, when I make the deck, that's when I connect that signal. So right before it gets appended, it gets added there. So now we should be cooking with gas. Let's try it again. And we're still getting the nil card. All right, let me just take a quick look. All right, so the one thing I've noticed is that when I run this, you can see that the error comes before I've even selected a card, which means the play war function shouldn't even be there. So I suspect the error is here. All right, so I found two errors. I think I might have mentioned this already, but just in case I didn't, this wasn't originally in the code. And under main, under the process here, this part is true up to here, and then the condition for here is if card selected. Oh, okay, yeah. And just keep all of that underneath the same. So in theory now we should have a working game-ish. So if I click on the jack and then click on it a second time, we still have another problem. Fun times. And this one should actually be pretty easy to figure out because in the hand script we still have not made the function I was calling there that failed, which was the search remove card. So under hand, we're going to add this just above the active card. And all this is going to do is it's going to look for whatever card is passed to it. And it's going to try to find that within the hand array, and then it is going to remove it. So one more time. All right, so we'll select the 7, play the 7, and this played correctly. The other one did not. And we have to make sure that the sizes get changed, which it might have changed. I guess we can't really see at the moment. So all right. All right, so right now when we play, oops, that's not what I wanted. There we go. When we select the card, it'll move. This card is too high up and the enemy card has gone through here. You might also notice that these cards have shrunk. So the reason is when we changed the skinning rules for how the enemy cards work in the enemy hand script, we actually did something that was missing from the last one, which was apply the scale. So what we're going to do to fix that is we are going to just simply go into the enemy hand, the enemy script right here, and sorry, not the enemy script, but the enemy object, and we're going to reset its card scale, or sorry, we're going to change it to 1 to 1. So now the size will be correct for what we're looking for. Although if we want to, we could make the smaller cards and just change the way the transform works. So now we still have the problem that it goes to the back of the card, and we notice this card is a little bit too high for where it displays. So the quickest fix for the card being in the back is to change the base Z index of all cards to 1. As you can see, there's a little bug there too. And in order to fix the second problem, obviously when we did war cards here, you can actually see the problem. You can see how this position is actually too high. So if we come here and we reset its position and then move to that and move it down to where we want it, everything should be good. Alright, so we have a little bug that I'll have to figure out for the next video, but this is where we're going to stop, where everything gets played here. In our next video, we will pick the bugs that sometimes allows us to select 2 cards, and we will move to actually making this gameplay effect and onto the turn card, etc. Basically finishing the entire game loop up to the point where it assesses the cards, and I think that'll probably be a video by itself because it's relatively complex. So I hope this has been an interesting video, and feel free to like and subscribe if you like what you see. Have a good day.